As Naomi mentioned, my name is Michael Sutherland. I'm a physicist, but I'm also the admissions tutor here at Corpus Christi College. And we're going to go through kind of some questions that you might ask yourself to help refine your thinking when you're making this important decision about which course and university to apply to. So you're kind of fortunate in a way, in the sense that the higher education sector in the UK is just so incredibly rich. There are, at last count, over 35,000 courses available on UCAS for you to choose from, 106 universities. And if you look at the global rankings of universities, 3 of the UK's universities are in the global top 10, 8 in the top 50. And we compare that to my country, Canada, where I think we managed to get 1 or 2 in the top 50. So be assured that the quality of the education you would receive is very, very high in the university sector. And in that sense, the choice of university, well, perhaps it is somewhat important, isn't as important as you think. Most UK universities will offer you really excellent educational opportunities. Having said that, it's important to make an informed choice. What you study will certainly affect your options in the future. So you want to make sure that you're studying and applying to a course that you're interested in, but also aligns with your future career ambitions. So what sorts of questions might you start asking yourself? Well, I think the first thing you need to ask yourself is, do you want to be a doctor or a nurse or a dentist or an architect? There are a number of careers that require specific undergraduate degrees. I think we all agree we want our surgeons to be trained in open heart surgery and not quantum physics. So the choice of career, if it's a specific career like medicine, would require you to have that undergraduate degree. Having said that, most careers, and by most I mean the vast majority, 90% plus, don't necessarily require a particular university degree. Many careers are just available for those students who get a reasonably good degree from a good university. So make that decision now, whether you want to be an engineer, architect, or in medicine. And if that doesn't apply to you, then you can take a deep breath and try to pursue the course that you're most interested in. Some interesting data here, and you may not be able to see all of the figures here, and I'm not going to take you through the whole thing, but this is a survey that we did of our graduates in history, looking at the sorts of careers that they went into 1 year after graduation. And on the left-hand side, that pie chart shows that 56% of historians were in the workforce a year after graduation. About a third were studying for a further degree, and a smaller percentage were perhaps taking a gap year. But the really interesting thing to look at is, of that 56% that were working, what careers did they go into? And you might think, well, historians, okay, you could be a teacher or an academic. But our graduates were going into things like the IT sector, management consultancy, accountancy, arts and recreation, publishing, charity sector, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see illustrated there this point that a good degree from a good university opens up all kinds of possibilities. Of our graduate engineers were employed within a year of graduating. But interesting, if you look at the careers that they went into, so it's not just technical careers, although many of them did go into that, but they were going into things like banking, things like arts sector, even charity, teaching, etc. So again, even for a fairly tailored or specific degree like engineering, this is something that is valued by employers across a wide variety of careers. So if you're not set on being a doctor or an architect, you should start thinking about what it is that you find interesting. University is a really remarkable time in your life. You get to spend 3 or 4 years learning in great depth and detail about a subject that you are interested in. And you're as you. And that can be an incredibly stimulating environment to be in. So why not choose the thing that aligns with your own interests, and be aware that many of our degrees, most of our degrees, will give you what are called transferable skills. So you would learn problem solving in a physics degree, you would learn essay writing in an English or philosophy degree. And these are the sorts of skills that allow you to get into those careers we talked about. So think about your A-level courses, certainly, but also think about the specific aspects of the A-level courses that you're interested in. If you're doing say history A-level, is there a particular period that interests you? Are you interested perhaps in the ancient languages that people communicated with? Are you interested, if you're doing a philosophy A-level, perhaps in ideas about morality and ethics, or are you interested in other areas of philosophy? So dig a bit deeper within your A-level courses and try to think about the things that you find the most stimulating. But of course, your A-level courses aren't going to teach you everything there is to know. And so you need to spend a bit of time, exploring your interests outside of the classroom. And I put one little image there, which Will is going to talk about in his session. This is our HE Plus website, which gives sort of taster activities in many, many different subjects that allow you to explore and develop your interests. So take time, to listen to popular science podcasts, to watch, television documentaries, and try to dig deep within a subject and figure out what it is that really interests you. The next question you might want to ask yourself is how do I like to learn? So if we take two identical courses, say, a science course, a biochemistry type course at different universities, we can see that they're often, although the content might be fairly similar, the way that it's taught can be very, very different. So some universities like Cambridge use mainly exams to assess you, and these are often sat at the end of the years. Other universities do what's called continuous assessment. So you're handing in, projects and coursework as you go, and that forms the majority of your mark. Some universities have very strong links with industry. And so here's an example I found on UCAS of a course from University of Aberdeen, which is biochemistry with an industrial placement. So there you spend a year embedded in industry, which is probably very good for your CV. And if that's how you like to learn, if you want to, be engaged with sort of practical applications of biochemistry, this would be a fantastic course to think about. Natural Sciences in Cambridge, which is our course for all sciences, is a little bit more sort of theoretically grounded, but that might appeal to others of you. So think carefully about how you like to learn. And be aware there are trends in higher educations. I think the pandemic has taught us all about remote learning, and many universities are thinking about how to offer some or all of their courses online. And this could appeal to some of you, but others of you, you may be very sick of Zoom. So think not just about the course content, but also about the style of teaching and learning. Another question you might ask yourself, is flexibility important to you? Do you have your heart set on physics? All you want to do is physics and you don't care about anything else at all. In that case, you might want to look at courses that just begin in year 1 with physics and end in year 3 or 4 only doing physics, because that would be tailored to your particular interests. Other courses, however, are very, very flexible. And this allows for you to change your interests as you go through. So you might go through a year of a particular course and think, well, actually, I thought I wanted to study this, but really now that I learn more, I think my interests are going more in this area. And some courses are very good at allowing this kind of tailored learning approach. And I've given one example here at Cambridge. This is our HSPS course, Human, Social, and Political Sciences. In the first year, you're required to do modules or papers, we call them, in politics and international relations, or social anthropology and sociology. But by year 3, you can broaden out and you can take modules or papers in subjects as diverse as archaeology or psychology. So this is a very flexible course, probably hundreds or even thousands of different possible permutations and combinations of these modules or papers. So it's really highly flexible, and that might appeal to some of you. And then finally, once you've thought about these things, you might want to consider, what is the student experience like? Hear not just from people like me who are admissions tutors, but hear from the students themselves. Do they like studying their particular degree? How do they find the workload? What's the social life like? Do they have opportunities to mingle with people within their subject or outside of their subject? And I think there's some really great resources available online for you. I've put up just a picture here of one of our day in the life videos. So we've got lots of these at Cambridge from our various students in various courses. But if you go online, if you look on YouTube, if you look at many university sites, you'll find student blogs, and you'll get a sense of what the student experience is like. And I think that can be very useful if you're trying to decide between two closely matched courses. So I'm just going to summarize what I said here. I think it's really important to do your research. This choice does have repercussions for you, and you really want to make sure you're choosing a course that fits your interests and the way that you like to learn. So do your research, spend time reading prospectuses, put aside many hours to do this over the summer. Always ask questions if you have them. So we'll have an opportunity today to answer some of your questions. But many of the universities will be running similar sorts of online virtual events over the summer. And you should always ask any questions that you have about particular courses. And I wanted to end just with one thought. Something that we see often at Cambridge is students apply to courses that they're familiar with. So everybody's heard of, say, history or English or law. Perhaps, they have an idea, well, I want to be a lawyer, so therefore I should apply to a law course. But it's entirely possible to transfer into a career like law later on in life by doing a first undergraduate degree in really any subject, and then doing a law conversion course after that. And many practicing lawyers go down this route. So it's perhaps better to think about, what is it about law that interests you? Are you interested in ideas of morality and ethics? Is this the kind of thing that gets you excited? Well, maybe why not consider, say, our theology, religion, and philosophy of religion course. This addresses those questions that you find interesting, but also it happens to have fewer applicants per place, say, than the law course. And there's a little chart I've put here of the most recent admissions data at Cambridge. You can see law there has an acceptance rate of 17%. Theology, religion, philosophy of religion has an acceptance rate of 42%. Now, importantly, you shouldn't just apply to the course that's easiest to get into, because that's probably going to end in failure. But I wanted to encourage you to think about perhaps smaller, perhaps less known courses. And if those align well with your interests, that might be a really wise choice to apply to. So having ended on this note, I'm going to now turn it over to three of my colleagues, each of whom is going to speak for 5 minutes about their particular course, and try to get you to think a little bit about whether this might be a good course for you to apply to. So the first person we're going to hear from is Ruth. And Ruth is our Director of Studies here in the TRPR course. So Ruth, do you want to give us a 5-minute overview of why this is an interesting subject?
Sure. So yeah, the full name of our course, as Michael said, is Theology, Religion and Philosophy of Religion. And this reflects its diversity. It's a very interdisciplinary course. So if you study A-levels at school, among them there might be, everything from history to languages to English literature to philosophy and ethics. We cover all of those in our degree. We even cover sociology and psychology in our degree. So it's a really diverse course. But in my 5 minutes, the first thing I'd like to do with the next slide is to just, first of all, smash down some myths about my course. I think a lot of people hear this word religion, theology, which means study of God, and they think, oh, you need to be religious if you want to do that degree, or you need to want to be a priest. It's not that at all. You don't need to be religious yourself. Some of our students are religious, but many are not religious. And of the ones that are religious, they don't belong to any one tradition. They belong to many different traditions. And it's not something that comes up in our teaching either. I don't know the religious sort of tendencies of a number of my students. So that's really not an issue. Nor is it a vocational degree. Just like you can do a law degree and then not become a lawyer, even more so, my degree, you can study religion and then not go on to do anything within religious traditions. In fact, of the students I've taught most recently, many of them go on to do exactly the same sorts of careers as that history pie chart that Michael was showing you earlier. And many of them go into things like the civil service, actually, because knowing about religion is really important for being a kind of a person working in politics today, because obviously politics is around the globe is so informed by religious practice and religious views. So a number of our students go into the civil service, into the charity sector, into public companies. But you do need to be interested in religious belief, practice, philosophy, ethics, morals as a topic of academic study. So yeah, next slide, just to go through this. But yeah, so why study religion today? Well, it's not gone away. So apparently 6 out of 7 people globally describe themselves as religious. It's a massive force in our world for affecting political, social, cultural change and shifts. So in our degree, you get to look at the history of religious traditions, but also the impact of religion on particular global phenomenon. And we've even got a paper we've got several modules in, for instance, religion and science and those interfaces and how religion and science overlap. So a number of my students studied maths and sciences at school as well, and have come into our degree from that background. Happiness, psychology, the imagination, all of these are covered in our degree. So yeah, next slide. The title of our degree reflects this interdisciplinarity. So just to run through, theology tends to refer to the study of religions from the inside. So looking at their teachings, looking at the assumptions that they have about the world, looking at what they tell their believers and how their believers worship and practice. But that religion word in the degree, we're thinking about religious traditions from the outside. So there's a number of modules, like I said, to do with the psychology of religion, the sociology of religion, the history of particular religious traditions, and the interfaces between religion and politics. And so those questions we ask about religion from the outside, as if religion is a kind of phenomenon that we're observing as sort of social scientific observers. And then finally, philosophy of religion. So if you do an A-level in philosophy and ethics, that's what this refers to: big philosophical topics raised by religions: truth, goodness, evil, meaning, the imagination, that sort of things. And then finally, on the final slide is just how we study. It's very similar to all of the arts degrees at the university. So there is contact time, but most of your week will be you and books and you and a computer studying for the essays and writing those essays and doing self-disciplined, self-directed study. But you'll also have 1 or 2 supervisions a week, the one-on-one teaching. You'll have several lectures, and you'll also take some language classes in your first year, because in our first year it is necessary to study an ancient language, which is a really cool thing. That's something that you don't have to go on and do later in the degree. There's so much flexibility in our degree. You can study all sorts of different modules, but in the first year we really want our students to get acquainted both with the history of religions and with a scriptural language, so either Hebrew, Greek, Arabic or Sanskrit. So yeah, our degree is fabulous. I really hope you take the time to consider it, and yeah, if you have any questions, please do ask at the end.
Thanks so much, Ruth. So we're going to switch over now to Brittany. Brittany is our Director of Studies in Anglo-Saxon, Norse, and Celtic. We call it Aznax here.
Hi, yes, this is possibly a degree you haven't heard of before and that you will definitely not find anywhere else. So the first thing I've given you is the link to our website, where you can find a lot more than I'm going to tell you in this quick 5-minute tour. But the first thing I'll point out on our website is that big picture in the middle. And this is, Aznax is a unique degree, and Corpus is the best place to study it because that's a picture of a manuscript that we have in Corpus. It's Corpus 183, as it's called. It's the blue chap in the crown is King Athelstan, and he's giving a book to Cuthbert. So Corpus houses possibly the most important single collection of early medieval English manuscripts. And our course is all about studying the Middle Ages of Northern Europe through direct engagement with primary sources. So Corpus is an exciting place to do a really unique sort of degree. If we just have the next slide, Michael, thanks. Yeah. So what exactly do Aznax study? Well, we study the history, languages and literature, as well as the material cultures, such as the manuscripts I just mentioned, of early medieval Northern Europe, that is Britain, Ireland, Scandinavia. And a little taste of the language there in the title of my slide, Wes Hall. You now know how to say hello in Old English. Aznax, it's very like the last degree you heard about in terms of skills. So it's, again, fundamentally interdisciplinary. We teach you what you need to know to work directly with original sources like that manuscript picture I just showed you. So the languages you need to know to read them, how to decipher the script, and so on, and the historical context you need to interpret it. And it's a really exciting period because it sees the first manuscript records of all the languages of Northern Europe. So in Britain, we've got English, Welsh, Scots Gaelic, and Latin, of course. In Ireland, early Irish and Old Norse in Scandinavia. And there's just an outpouring of literature that explodes onto the scene when all of these vernaculars emerge. So we've got famous works like the Toyn in Irish, the Mabinogion in Welsh, Beowulf in Old English, and in Old Norse, the Icelandic sagas and the poetic Edda. So all about characters like Odin and Thor and their adventures. And it's also a really important period historically because, not least from a modern perspective, because we see the complex and changing national identities that we have now first emerging. So say the word English comes onto the scene. And it's really crucial to understanding the misrepresentations of the medieval past that we're seeing a lot now in contemporary right-wing movements, to learn about what the reality of these terms is originally, and actually what a sort of complex, multilingual, multicultural place Britain was in the Middle Ages. Could we have the next one? So just to give you an idea what some of the subjects you could study are, we ask you to pick 6 of 10 in your first year, and I've given you a list on the slide here. And again, this is all on the website. So you've got about half of them are history papers and about half are language and literature papers, and we strongly encourage you to mix those. So say you can study Scandinavian history alongside the language of the Vikings, Old Norse, and you can do any combination you like. So there's a lot of flexibility. And then I'll just mention those 2 at the bottom, because maybe those will be the least familiar. Paleography and codicology. Paleography is the study of ancient handwriting, or handwriting, I should say, and codicology of how books are physically made. So this is incredibly unusual in undergraduate courses to be able to do this. And of course, part of the reason is we've got so many of them on site, but that's a really exciting aspect of the course that complements the other papers. And then finally, there's a lot of scope for independent research. So you can do a dissertation on any subject that interests you. It's essentially a long essay where you go into a lot of more depth on a subject that interests you. So that's about what the first year would look like. And the pattern of teaching, again, is very similar to what we just heard. We have a weekly lecture for each paper, plus a translation class for the language papers. We'll get you reading medieval languages within a couple of weeks. And then a practical script reading session for paleography. And then aside from that, again, the majority of your hours in a week will probably be spent working on a supervision essay. And that's these are all one-on-one in Aznax supervision. So you meet with a lecturer or another expert in that field, and you write about a 2,000-word essay on a subject each week, where you read some primary sources and some secondary scholarship about them, and have a think about it for yourself. So the skills, again, nobody learns Aznax in school. So we teach all of these things from scratch. So everybody's in the same boat together. Nobody's done any Old Norse before. So we teach absolutely everything from scratch. And there's a great sense of community because we are a very small kind of centralized degree that you'll be with students from other colleges, and everybody's in the same boat learning these things together. And could I just have the final slide? Yeah, so then let me just point you again. There's a nice big section on our website all about what we do, and you can watch some videos of students talking about their experience, which, as Michael said, is in a lot of ways more valuable than me telling you about it from my perspective. So if any of those things, if languages and English and history interest you, and we're sort of like classics in this, if you like where they interface and thinking about those, using those different skills together, then Aznax is a really great course to consider.
Great, thank you very much, Brittany. And then our final speaker is going to be Tom, and Tom is one of our Director of Studies here in Classics.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Michael. So yeah, nice to see you all. And all three of these courses are great, and I wish I could have studied them all, but I am here to talk about classics for a few minutes. So classics, in many respects, is quite similar to these other two courses you've heard about. You develop similar skills, similar mode of teaching, but different object of study. And the main object of study of classics, the cultures, worlds, civilizations of primarily Greece and Rome in the ancient world. But like with the others, we've seen a very interdisciplinary course. So next slide, please. And I would contend potentially that classics is the most interdisciplinary, or has it most baked into it, in that we study the literature of these periods, the history, the philosophy, the art and archaeology, the linguistics. And many people argue that the ancient Greece and Rome are fundamental to the modern day in terms of development of key concepts like democracy, philosophy, science, all those kind of things. And that's definitely true to some degree, although slightly reductive and skewed history. But we can definitely see ourselves mirrored through different civilizations of the past, as with Aznax and here. Next slide, please. So there are various different, as I've said, things that you study with classics. And one of the key ones is languages, as we've seen with the other courses that we've heard about today. And for classics, you don't need to have studied any specific subject before. You can pick up the languages from scratch at university, and Cambridge has a specific 4-year course where you start with learning Latin and then pick up Greek later, all excellent teaching in-house in the faculty with these great academics. So it's a great opportunity. And then you move on to literature. You can study both Latin and Greek literature from a wide range of periods, but also see how these literatures influence those of the later day, including the modern day, and even think about later Byzantine, modern Greek literature. And there's even an option to go into Babylonian literature, like the Gilgamesh and other things like that, from a very different cultural space. Next is ancient history, again, from a broad time period. So you can really focus in on whatever interests you. We go all the way up to Constantinople. And then we also have, I believe the next is philosophy. And different courses in different universities, you can even study modern philosophy as part of classics. So you can go from the really first seeds of philosophical thought in classical or archaic Greece, all the way up to, in some places, even like the philosophy of science as part of classics. And the next is art and archaeology, thinking more about the material culture of these ancient worlds, mosaics, statues, temples, what people ate, all kinds of different things, and houses. And then finally, linguistics, studying the languages from a more linguistic perspective, thinking how languages develop, change, evolve, adapt, intersect, how they borrow bits and pieces from each other, and even just thinking how languages work more generally, even thinking primarily with English. So that's an overview, really wide-ranging angles of approach, really seeing the subject in 3D. But classics also has a broader reach beyond Greece and Rome as well. And I've just given you this map to show you how far Greek culture in around the 200 BC, say, really spread all the way into Egypt, into Afghanistan, all the way up to India, basically. And we can see on the left, you've got a Greek king presenting himself as an Egyptian pharaoh. At the bottom, you've got a Greek inscription in the heart of Afghanistan. So Greek really spread far and wide. And Ai-Khanoum, also in Afghanistan, is a community that was both Greek and Iranian simultaneously, a really weird mix, multicultural mix of cultures, in many respects more like the modern day. We can really see the mixing, acculturation, all this contact to different communities and peoples. So a really wide range of things and approaches. And I find it fascinating. And I would recommend you check out what else we can look at. So to end, I also, with the next slide, before ending, you can also often combine classics with different degrees. Different universities do different combinations. I think Cambridge, you can do it with modern languages, throw in some Latin or Greek, and elsewhere you can do it with various other combinations or focus more on the ancient history or other bits and pieces. So it's worth really seeing what might be of interest. But finally, I just wanted to return with the next slide to what Michael was saying generally, and just with a classics example. These are some examples of what classics go into. The top one from this year group is banking and investment. So really driving home the point that at university, unless you want to do a specific vocational course, do what you enjoy, what you are passionate about, and then you can go into whatever you like afterwards. It sets you up well with all those transferable skills we heard about. And on the final slide, I've given you some more specific examples of where classics alumni from Cambridge have gone into. And again, you see the mix of consultancy, banking, law, etc., journalism. So ultimately, with a bit of ring competition, going back to where Michael started, do what you love, do what you enjoy, and then you can go and do whatever you like after you've had that time enjoying at university. So do really consider all three of these courses. I think they're all great, and yeah, do check them out and see what might interest you. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you to all three of our speakers. There's some really interesting thoughts there, and hopefully that's stimulated a bit of interest on your part. Naomi, we're going to turn it over to you, and I think there's been some questions that have come in.
Yeah, so a few questions have come in, mainly on quite specific courses. So some of them I'm going to direct to you, Michael, until we get some more sort of the classics, the theology and Aznax questions come in as well. So somebody's asked how pre-interview assessments are going to work. So like the NSAA, but any pre-interview assessment really.
Yeah, so pre-interview assessments will be hopefully in schools as we did before the pandemic. Of course, much depends on what happens over the next few months with lifting the lockdown, but we will be running things like the BMAT, the NSAA, etc., and most likely these will be in schools.
Great, thank you very much. We've had a couple of questions on success rates, because you showed that slide on success rates. So I think psychological and behavioural sciences wasn't on there. Are you able to comment a little bit on kind of what the sort of success rates there are, or how competitive a course it is?
Yeah, so I showed half the chart there. I showed the arts and humanities courses and didn't put the sciences courses. Off the top of my head, PBS is about 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 success rate. So somewhere around 20%, I think.
Thank you. And then another one on success rates. So somebody's asked why the success rate for HSBS seems quite low compared to some of the other courses, maybe.
So the way that you work out these success rates is you just look at the number of places that are available at the university and the number of applicants you get. So HSPS tends to be a very, very popular choice. But having said that, there are elements of that course that you can study in some of the other courses. So again, getting back to this idea of sort of, digging down and finding your specific interests within a wider subject, and then researching some of the lesser known courses to see if those align with your interests.
Thank you. And then a question about medicine and how competitive is medicine?
Well, medicine is, it used to be our most competitive subject. Now that's computer science, actually. But medicine is around, if I recall correctly, a 1 in 8, 1 in 9 success rate. So it is very, very competitive.
Yeah, thank you. Question for Brittany and Tom together, I think. Can you combine classics and Aznax in any way?
I don't know that you can formally, though. Of course, there are lots of places that we meet. Latin language and literature is something that we're both very interested in. And I think in some of our sort of advanced linguistic modules, we possibly meet again later in the degree. So we have, we see each other often, and there's a lot of overlapping areas of interest, though I think our teaching is mostly separate.
Great, thanks Tom for agreeing with that. So this one is for Tom then. For classics, is there any reason why Latin is prioritised? This person said that at Oxford, they think you have the choice between ancient Greek and Latin, but maybe if you know, comment on the difference between the Oxford and Cambridge course there as well.
Yeah, so in Oxford, you tend to be able to go in with either. I think why Cambridge starts with the Latin, in part, it's closer in many respects to potentially other languages people have studied, French, Spanish, etc. at school, Italian, and also the alphabet similarities. So in many respects, it's a better starting off point in some respects. And then once you've developed the skills for approaching that language, then adding on the difference of alphabet, and in many respects, Greek is slightly more different in how it works. It's almost a better stepping stone to Greek. So that progression, I think, is a nicer, more smooth one. So I think that's why. And then everyone's also doing it together. So you have a whole year group all doing the same thing, all sharing together. So more communal and collaborative in some respects as well.
Thank you. There are quite a few questions coming in on kind of specific success rates of specific courses now. So what I'm going to say is at the end of this session, I'm going to put in the chat a link to Cambridge University statistics. You can look up statistics for specific courses. But again, if you do have specific course questions, do come back at 3:30 as well. And that's probably the best place to answer those. So moving on to a question for Michael, I think. Can you change course after you begin to study it?
Yeah, so it's possible, and that involves a conversation with what's called your director of studies. So what we've just met 3 directors of studies here at Corpus, as well as the senior tutor of the college. That decision is usually made on the by the college. Having said that, it's incredibly rare because of the fact that we are looking for people who display some kind of interest and enthusiasm for the course that they're applying for. Usually, the people who we accept for, say, classics or Aznax are really, really excited about studying that subject. And so they tend not to want to switch. So at Corpus, I think we might have 1 student a year out of the 100 or 90 that we offer who wavers a bit. But generally, the ones that we admit will just stay and finish their degree.
Thank you. Another question for Tom. Is A-level classics necessary for classics at university?
Not at all. You don't have to have studied classics in any form, be it the languages or even like classical civilization or anything. If you're passionate about it and you can show that, yeah, you're completely welcome. And you, as I say, you pick up Latin from scratch. So yeah, no prerequisites at all.
Great. Another A-level related question, I think this one's for Michael. If you're feeling conflicted about 2 degrees and you're doing A-levels in both of them, do you have, sorry, let me just read this again. What if you're feeling conflicted about 2 degrees that you're doing in A-levels and have become passionate in both? How should you kind of decide between those 2?
Yeah.
So, first time.
So if you really can't make up your mind, and I don't know, you love history, but you love languages, then what you can do is you can have a look for universities that offer so-called joint degrees, where you do some language stuff and some history stuff, and you graduate with a joint honors degree. In Cambridge, I use that example because we have options to do history and politics or history and modern languages. So that's a great way to blend those 2 interests together. But we don't offer joint degrees in every subject, and if you really can't decide, just have a look at what other universities offer. Given that there are 35,000 UCAS choices, there's bound to be a course out there that will allow you to combine your interests.
Thank you. Question for Ruth. So coming from a science background, would I find it more difficult to get onto the TR/PR course? And what could I do outside of A-levels to become more familiar with the themes of the course?
So just as Tom was saying, for classics, you don't need a classics A-level, you do not need a religion or theology or arts A-level. We do like to see evidence, obviously, if we're making a decision on applicants, if they just have science A-levels, if there's some evidence of them being able to write fluently. So if outside of your learning, you wanted to enter, say, an essay competition, there's plenty available. Universities throughout the country run these all the time. And, that's something like that you could put in your personal statement to say that I wrote this essay for this competition. It gives us a sense that, you wouldn't be uncomfortable coming and doing an arts course, having just studied science at school. Saying that, however, I've had students who've come with maths and sciences A-levels and have really flourished. And it's just, if you're doing a really competitive A-level subject like the sciences, it's only a very good thing for us looking at application. So yeah, but look on our website as well. I mean, I think, yeah, Brittany and Tom pointed applicants to their websites. Look at the Divinity, the Theology website, because we've got lots and lots of reading recommendations that you can just, yeah, show your passion outside of your school subjects.
Thank you. A science-related one now. We've been mainly on arts and humanities so far, so I'll pose this one to Michael. If you really enjoy a science like physics, sort of specifically, more than other sciences, should you still apply for natural sciences here, or do you think you should be applying for the set sort of physics course somewhere else?
Yeah, I think that's a great question and something you need to think about very carefully. So other universities, and that includes Oxford, will offer a physics-specific degree where you start in year 1 and do physics, and you go all the way through to year 4 and just do physics. And if you really are not interested in any other subject, that's probably a wise choice for you. Having said that, the way that we teach sciences through what's called a natural sciences degree, and you do 3 sciences in your first year. and then you choose to specialize in your second, third, and fourth year. And the reason that we teach it like this is this promotes interdisciplinary thinking. So we think it's quite good for a physicist to know maybe a little bit about geology or a little bit about chemistry. That's often where the exciting Nobel Prize winning research happens. But it also allows you to change your mind. So you could come in thinking you like physics and sit through some of my sessions in first year and think, God, physics is not for me. But that's okay, because you can switch easily into geology or chemistry, say. So flexibility and interdisciplinarity, I think, are the two main things that natural sciences offers.
Thank you. Another question for Michael. I think this is an important one. Somebody's asked, at Cambridge, how are you generally trying to diversify your community, whether that be in background or race or any other aspect of diversity?
Yeah, so we've been very active, I think, in Cambridge in exploring different ways to diversify our intake. And I think there are a number of really exciting programs that are coming out. So one is actually right here at Corpus Christi College. It's called the Bridging Course. And what we've done is we've expanded our college numbers by about 10. And we've opened these places up to students from underrepresented and disadvantaged backgrounds. And we make them an offer, and then they come to the college 3 weeks early to get some additional tuition and training to help consolidate knowledge and core skills before they even begin university. And this is completely free, and they don't pay for this. So, that's something exciting that we're doing here at Corpus. The university has launched what's called a foundation year. So this is designed for students, again, from disadvantaged backgrounds, where they can come in and do a year where they learn some essential study skills and essential knowledge that will help them then apply to a university course and progress perhaps even here at Cambridge. So we're always innovating, we're always looking at new ways to diversify intake, but it's something I think that's very much on our minds here at Cambridge.
Fantastic, thank you. I think this question could be answered by any of you, so do feel free to jump in if you have a view on this. Is it important to know if you want to pursue a master's or a PhD when you're applying to a particular course? And if so, should you comment on that at all in your application? Who wants to kick us off there?
I think it's not necessary, but if you've thought that far and you'd like to mention it, then by all means do. It can be an interesting thing to talk about in the interview possibly, but certainly we're not expecting you, I think. Would you agree to look that far down the line?
Yeah, I mean, anyone, if you don't have a career ambition when you're writing your personal statement, that will not disadvantage you, and you don't need to include that at all. It's just, we measure applications, don't we, on passion and interest and aptitude in the subject currently. So, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps one thing I would add to that is every university, and Cambridge included, will have a very good careers department. So we have a career service here at Cambridge, which, most of our students, apart from the medics, of course, don't really know what they want to do afterwards. And so they come in, as Ruth says, really interested and excited about their subject. And then as they progress towards their second or third year, they can go to the career service. They can learn about different careers. There's often events. The recruiters will come in and hold, an evening session about careers in banking or consultancy or whatever. So, don't feel that you have to have a career in mind when you apply. That will sort itself out.
Brilliant. I'm going to make this the last question so that we have a little break before our next session at 11 o'clock. So when deciding among applicants, how useful are 4 A-levels? This is probably a question for Michael.
Yeah, so I would say if your school policy is that you take 3 A-levels, then that's absolutely fine. Then you're not at advantage or disadvantage for taking 3 A-levels. 4 A-levels can sometimes be a bit of a stretch on your time. And so if your school policy is you can take 4, but you find that it causes you to drop a grade, we would much rather see A star, A star, A than 4 A's, for instance. So if you think from a time management perspective, doing the 4 A-levels is going to be challenging for you, I would stick with 3. The only caveat I would say to that is if you are applying for a physical natural sciences route, or you're applying for something like computer science or mathematics, and your fourth A level is further maths, then you should probably take it, because maths and further maths as separate A levels, there's obviously a lot of intellectual content overlap between those two subjects. So it's not quite as different as doing, you know, philosophy and French or something like that. So yeah, slightly complicated answer to a slightly complicated question.